In section 4 and 5, we're going to be looking at pretty much a sort of an overview of what we're going to be looking at for the rest of the school year. So it's a lot of technology and things like that that we'll be talking about that will come up when we get further into the bio. But one of the first things we're going to talk about that's used in biology is microscopes. So in class, we'll end up using some microscopes. We'll probably most likely end up using what are known as dissecting microscopes, which we'll talk about that when we get there. So a microscope provides an enlarged image of an object. There's light microscopes or LM microscopes, and they are going to be able to magnify things uh, usually about 1,000 times what you'd be able to see with the naked eye. You have scanning electron microscopes. These are microscopes that are going to shoot beams of electrons at the sample that you're looking at. The issue with this is it needs to be placed in a vacuum. So it's a lot like the light microscope. Beam of light hitting it is, in this case, it's going to be a beam of electrons that hit it. So this is an image of the stoma, which you'd seen in the last slide, but this one's with a scanning electron microscope. You also have transmission electron microscopes, which shoot the electrons through the sample that you're looking at, which they still need to be in a vacuum for that to occur. And again, here's the same picture of the stoma of a plant. So imaging and technology is used in medicine. You've got X-ray images, which many of you have probably seen before. You've got MRIs, which is magnetic resonance imaging. Some of you may have had this done before. This is same knee, but with an MRI. So you can see muscle and tissue and things like that with it as opposed to just bone. You have a functional MRI, which is going to end up looking like that. So a lot of times computer models are going to be used when we're doing biology for things that we're not able to set up an experiment and do things, or it's going to take too long. So they'll set up a computer model for it to be used to study the systems that, like I said, can't be studied directly. So you could set up a model for heart attacks. So you'd be able to see the effects of medicine on the human body. You could look at the movement of water molecules in and out of a cell, or the spread of disease through a population. So some of these things would be hard to really set up and do, so you'd want a computer model for it to be able to help you. Computer models are used when experiments are not safe, ethical, or practical in being able to do. Now, when we talk about genetics and looking at the DNA molecule, there is a gene is a segment of DNA that stores genetic information. And again, we'll get way into this when we talk about genetics. So here's an example of you've got gene A, B, C, and D there on that chromosome that is pictured on this slide. So through our understanding of DNA, we can study how genetics works on a molecular level. So we'll end up looking at molecular genetics and seeing what causes organisms to be the way that they are because of the molecules that are there. We'll look at genomics. So again, like I said, in section 5, it's more of the same, looking at what the future has for biology. So knowing biology, some of you might be like, why do I need to learn this? I'm never going to use. Okay, well, here's some reasons why you may need to use biology. So the knowledge of biology helps you understand your health. So things like food allergies, why am I allergic to this? Is it a genetic issue that you have? What happens with the histamine response? So we'll get into that type of a thing, and you'd be able to see what happens with food allergies. We'll look at potential effects of obesity. So you got one really fat mouse, sort of a normal mouse there. We will also be looking at cancer. So what causes cancer? The effects of alcohol and tobacco and other drugs on the systems. So knowledge of biology can also help you understand environmental issues. So when we talk about ecology, we'll really get into this type of a thing, which ecology is coming up in the next chapter. So we'll look at the interactions of ecosystems. We'll look at what pollution does to ecosystems, and we'll look at how biodiversity is affected by things. So biotechnology is going to offer great promises that may also raise many issues. So biotechnology is the use and application of living things and biological processes. So it's basically using living things to do things for us. So when we again are talking about biotechnology, some things that we're going to end up using it for would be DNA testing in medicine and forensics to see what actually happens with certain medicines and things. We'll be talk about how we use it to make transgenic or genetically modified crops, so putting genes of one organism into another or turning on or off genes in a particular plant or animal. And we'll look at transgenic bacteria when we get into the genetics part, which is second semester. So having bacteria that has the gene for human insulin in it, and the bacteria has no use for that gene, but it makes insulin and gets rid of it as a waste product, and we give it to people that have diabetes. So questions are going to be raised about the use of biotechnology. So the safety of genetically modified crops is going to be one thing that we'll talk about when we get into that. We will also end up uh, looking at the spread of undesirable genes in a population of plants. So, or may jump to another plant or another organism that you didn't want to. Decrease in biodiversity would be another thing. So all that's going to be bringing up ethics and what is good, what is not. So biology presents many unanswered questions. So over the past 50 years, biological knowledge has greatly increased. And it's going to continue to increase as we get better technology and more understanding of things. So there are still many questions that are unanswered in biology. So how are memories stored in the brain? So how do viruses mutate? Viruses are not a living thing, like we had talked about in class. So how do they mutate? What causes them to do that? Does life exist on planets other than Earth? So all these things are stuff that can be answered in the future when we get better technology. So that is the end of the notes for section 4 and 5, and actually the end of the notes for all of chapter 1.